Hey there, it is Coach Jay, your body transformation specialist, and today what we're going to be reviewing is polyunsaturated fat versus saturated fat. Which one is better? Which one is literally evil when it comes to your actual hormones and your thyroid as well as metabolic health? So that's what we're going to be discussing today. And the author of this information is going to be Dr. Raymond Peat, who has been studying these topics for 40 plus years. These are science based as well as lab based, tested, tried and true understandings when it comes to what I'm going to speak about today. So, this is going to be a huge grand reveal for a lot of you, unless you have a PhD in biology. And it is really difficult sometimes to understand and break down Dr. Raymond Peat's studies and what he believes. And that is why you need to have a base of knowledge when it comes to nutrition, such as a certification or a degree. Now, I am going to use my 12 years of experience when it comes to nutrition, as well as my Precision Nutrition Level 1 certification to help you break this understanding down very, very well. So you understand why polyunsaturated fat to the monounsaturated fat to the saturated fats are different and what it means for your overall health of your liver, of your body, and your metabolism, and specifically the thyroid. So, without further ado, I'm just going to review the notes that I took on this very extensive interview, and it led me into far deeper research when it came to the metabolism, and I feel very well versed when it comes to the understanding of the metabolism and keeping the thyroid in good health. Now, once you understand these things, of course, this is a way of life. This is not a diet approach, none of this. And that's not what I teach anyway. If you know anything about me, I'm not about dieting. I'm really focused when it comes to saving people's lives and their bodies on doing things in a balanced manner, having nothing to do with a short-term anything. So this is a way of life when I speak to you in regards to these things. So get comfortable. This is going to take me a while to break all of this down, and I'm going to read it to you because my notes probably be rather long for most of you. I know the attention span of the average adult is very short, so hopefully me reading this is going to allow you to lock in and focus on the things that I'm saying so you can make better choices for yourself as well as for your family. And if you are focused on fat loss, then you can get better results. And if you have any thyroid issues, or if you have any metabolic issues, or perhaps any issues when it comes to your blood test and the results thereof, well, now you can feel more comfortable in knowing what it is that you're supposed to do regarding the fats in your body. Okay, now here we go. So, the first thing is a study showed that when fed saturated fat, the liver condition improves. When fed fish oils, linseed oils, and other polyunsaturated fats, the liver condition worsens. That's the first note that I took, showing that saturated fat is head over heels better for you than polyunsaturated fat. Next one, when people take fish oils and they have high cholesterol, it moves the cholesterol out of the blood and into the tissue. So after using fish oil, it may look better in blood test to the untrained eye, but the cholesterol isn't out of the body entirely. It's just stored in the tissues of the body. So this is very important to understand because if you are taking fish oils or you've been directed to take fish oils, what you have to understand is it appears that the blood tests are doing better. It appears that the cholesterol is moving out of your body if you have these higher cholesterol issues. But the truth is the actual fat that we're talking about, the cholesterol, it is just moved into the tissues of your body. So it's not entirely removed. So be careful when you're thinking about fish oils and them, decreasing inflammation and all of these different claims that are going on all around the world. with little to no evidence at all. Not much. We're not talking about extensive research. Great thing for the body, listening to mainstream media research and basically research that was promoting their own self-gain. It may have been gain that is from a financial standpoint or just gain to make them look like they are an authority. But again, we are talking about the studies from a doctor who has been studying the metabolic health as well as your thyroid health and other things such as your liver health, etc., and what creates degenerative diseases and so much more for 40 whole years. So that pretty much knocks out that fish oils are great for your body. Now, another thing about cholesterol is
it is one of our most important antioxidants.
It's actually generally a protective antitoxin. So it protects the body against toxins. So cholesterol is actually a good thing, the balance of it. Now, the liver knows to maintain as much cholesterol as it can, as the liver needs cholesterol for cell division to actually take place. Now, what is cell division? It's a process in which the division of a cell into two daughter cells with the same genetic material actually happens. So, contrary to what popular media would have you understand and religiously believe, the science clearly shows all of the internal cellular processes in the body rely on both cholesterol and saturated fat for optimal functioning. So without the two, your metabolism suffers, your health suffers in general. All right. Now, a word on fish. Obviously, since we're talking about fats, we definitely have to get into the conversation of fish eventually. Okay. So let's talk about that now. Bigger fish get their fat from plankton. Okay. Now, how does that happen? Well, it's because the smaller fish eat the plankton, and the plankton fat is made by algae, and the algae is where the M-3 fat comes from. So basically, what we call fish fat is actually algae fat. In another study, scientists and researchers gave warm-blooded fish more fish oil, or a diet containing less saturated fat in general, and they compared this lower saturated fat diet to one higher in saturated fat. Their test was focusing on endurance health. Check this out. When they tested the endurance of both groups of fish, they found that the fish had less endurance on a high polyunsaturated fat diet and greater endurance on a higher saturated fat diet. Dr. Peat cracked a funny saying, "I guess fish oil isn't even so great for fish." The next thing is that you want to really understand about anything, and basically any life, we'll call it, in the sea, is that they have access to iodine and selenium and other trace minerals as well. Whereas inland, they are at the mercy of the soil, making them oftentimes deficient in copper and selenium. Now, we're about to get into why iodine and selenium in particular is very important for the metabolism. Now, the function of iodine in the human body is to make thyroid hormones. These hormones control the body's metabolism and many other important functions. The body also needs thyroid hormones for proper bone and brain development during pregnancy and infancy. As for selenium, it is a powerful mineral that is essential for proper functioning of the body in general, playing a critical role in metabolism and thyroid function. It also helps the body protect the body from damage caused by oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is basically a disturbance between the balance of free radicals in your body and antioxidants in your body, which is why it is very recommended for a human being to take in fruit to the human body as a part of a balanced diet. So hopefully that convinces you that marine life or sea life is actually really healthy and good for you. But what about farm fish? Well, basically farm fish is a no-no. And the reason why is because they are fed a diet that drastically affects the cells negatively in a metabolic way. Why is this? Because they are fed a diet that contains polyunsaturated fats. It always leads back to that. Now, what about fish in the Amazon? So, fish in the Amazon have been shown to contain fat that is as saturated as butter because of the temperature of the water. So, Amazon fish are A-OK. Some examples of Amazonian fish, most of which you will never eat, are the arapaima, which is the largest freshwater fish in the world, the tambaraqui, which is known as the best tasting freshwater fish in the world, the kangaroo, which is a tiny catfish, the red-bellied piranha, the armored catfish, the electric eel, the pancake stingray, the bull shark, the vampire fish, the peacock bass, and many others. Now, what about populations of people who are known to survive on high saturated fat diets? For example, the Eskimos are extremely healthy people because they live off of whale blubber, which is extremely saturated. Their normal diet is high protein and fat, no fruits, no vegetables, and yet lower heart disease and cancer. We know that the Inuit diet is high in selenium, which of course you now know. Selenium, it protects the thyroid as well as just the common condition of the metabolism. And selenium is common in whale skin and likely explains why prostate cancer is almost unheard of in the north as well as cancer. Then you have the famous long-lived people of the Azerbaijan. They eat a diet containing a low ratio of unsaturated to saturated fat, and they emphasize fruit, vegetables, and dairy products. Now, we can't talk about high fat if we don't talk about the UK and the fact that doctors over there are reversing cancer naturally in their patients by a higher saturated fat intake. Then you have the French. They have a relatively low incidence of coronary heart disease while having a diet relatively rich in saturated fat, and only 9.5% of the women are actually obese. That's absurd. Then the Swiss. Switzerland has the lowest rates of obesity behind Japan and South Korea, with only 7.5% of the population classed as obese, even less than the French women, who are famously depicted by Mireille Guilano in her best-selling book, French Women Don't Get Fat. The Swiss eat about 10 kilograms of chocolate per person per year, more than anyone else in the world, and they eat loads of cheese and full cream milk. Then you have the Dutch. Data shows that the Dutch are eating lots of saturated fat from cheese, milk, and other milk products, meat, hard and solid fats, and butter, but it appears to be lowering their risk for heart attacks. In one study, despite 40 years of high saturated fat consumption, the Dutch have seen a 70% drop in mortality from heart attacks. Their rate of dying from ischemic heart disease is lower than the US and only slightly higher than the French. This is just to name a few of populations who are thriving off of higher saturated fat in their daily diet. Now, we can't really talk about fat if we don't talk about diabetes, because mainstream scientists have linked so much of this higher saturated fat and also sugar to diabetes. Let's take a look at it. So diabetes is a good model of the energy deprived state as a whole, says Dr. Peat. So basically, if you have diabetes, your energy state, your metabolism, and also your thyroid is in shambles. Now, scientists and researchers are starting to see that Alzheimer's is nothing more than diabetes of the brain. The effects of inflammation in all of the degenerative diseases and inflammation in general involves failure of energy, which gives the brain, in the case of Alzheimer's disease, and the body, in case of diabetes, no choice but to make toxic lactic acid from the glucose consumed or available in the blood. The lactic acid is pro-inflammatory and doesn't produce enough energy for normal functioning. Diabetes was observed by Randall in 1963 to 64 or so, that if you increase free fatty acids in the blood, you very quickly make the cells unable to use glucose. There are two very strong points now that free fatty acids prevent the use of glucose. Pyruvic dehydrogenase is needed to burn the glucose and then stimulate glucagon, which turns on the synthesis of glucose at the expense of protein. And glucagon is basically very important that if your blood sugar is dropping, it allows it to not drop so low that you die. Then glucagon, in response, stimulates the release of more toxic free fatty acids. This is why it's not good to allow your sugars to drop. And there are several studies where the free fatty acids activate terrible things such as adrenaline, ACTH, cortisone, thyrotropic hormone, and of course, glucagon, all of which increase the release of free fatty acids from your fat cell storage. Obviously not a good thing. This is very illogical for the body to create these vicious cycles in which once you start having an energy failure from your metabolism and your thyroid, you literally turn on exactly what caused it. What a catch-freaking-22. But it turns out that only the polyunsaturated fatty acids have these anti-energy effects, going back to polyunsaturated fats not being so good for the body. If you look at the comparison of stearic acid and linoleic acid, aka butter versus corn oil, for example, the butter turns off adrenaline, ACTH, and cortisol, of course the bad guys, and the corn oil turns them on. LOL. And the excitotoxic system in the brain, Dr. Peat goes on to share, that literally wears out and can kill brain cells, are also activated by the polyunsaturated fats in proportion to the double bonds they have. So, polyunsaturated fats cause degenerative disease, diabetes. They block your ability to use sugars, which keeps your blood sugars high. This eventually can lead directly to Alzheimer's disease, and it's common due to the blocking of energy production, aka the metabolism. Now, Dr. Peat says, look up the saturation index, and you will find that all but one or two studies found that people with cancer have much more polyunsaturated fats in the actual tumors and in their bodies than healthy people. For example, in one study, twice as much polyunsaturated fats. Another example, they put rodents on a diet of high saturated fats, which delayed their development of breast cancer. The saturation index being a matter of protecting against cancer. And it's similar for heart disease as well. There was a study in which intaking the polyunsaturated fats in animals literally shortened their lives, with whom had a tendency of heart disease, where a very high saturated fat diet extended their lives, literally doing the opposite. Now, Dr. Peat cautions having free fatty acids floating in the blood because, as we now know, it creates a high cause of dying from everything, but from what he says is from shock, cancer, heart disease, and all kinds of infections. So what should diabetics do? Well, diabetics should test if their fatty acids are high in their blood. This is what Dr. Peat says. It's been shown for years that niacin is not only effective for heart disease, but diabetes. So they should definitely be using niacin, simply because it lowers the free fatty acids. But this isn't catching on. It's not catching on, guys. Just using something as simple as niacin, getting more niacin in your diet. Why is that? Because it's so cheap, and the government and pharmaceutical industry would literally plummet because obviously they want their money. Now, how do you get niacin? So niacin, or vitamin B3, again, that's vitamin B as in boy 3, is an essential nutrient. It's very essential, which you must consume it through your diet. Anytime you hear essential, it means it has to come from your diet. Your body doesn't create enough of it. Now, so, among other things, niacin aids your metabolism and nervous system. Now, many foods are rich in niacin, especially animal products like meat, fish, and poultry. Okay, now be careful on the poultry, and we'll talk about that later on in some different attachments. But be careful with your poultry for many reasons, most of which is they are fed lots of polyunsaturated fats. Unless you know, of course, they are not fed polyunsaturated fats, do not touch them. In regards to the fish, as we know, they cannot be farm raised. They definitely need to be Amazonian, which you're probably not going to get much of, or you're going to get them wild caught in the sea. Moving on.
The vegetarian sources include mushrooms, green peas, and potatoes. So, what exactly are some examples of good fat? Well, good fats would start with palm oil, coconut oil, butter, hopefully grass fed if you can find it, olive oil, cocoa butter, as well as the different fats that come from chocolate, which of course is going to be saturated, beef fat, so literally BEEF fat, and then dairy. Okay, so those are really your awesome fats. Basically, all of them are high in what? Saturated fat, outside of the olive oil, which of course is monounsaturated, which is cool. But we focus on the saturated fat because they speak directly to the metabolism as well as the thyroid. And of course, lots and lots and lots of our body is made up of saturation or saturated fat. So concerning beef, because cows have 4 stomachs, they can actually transfer PUFAs, or as you can call them, polyunsaturated fatty acids, PUFA is for short, from the corn they are fed into saturated fat. So beef is not dangerous to the thyroid or the metabolism. Conversely, we need to limit foods such as chicken, turkey, and pig because, number one, the FDA and the USDA loosely regulate and monitor the nutrition and care of these animals. That is a proven fact. Number two, these animals are fed a high polyunsaturated fat diet if they are raised on a farm. Okay? Dr. Peat further explains that the cow's bacteria uses vitamin E to saturate the fat, basically detoxifying the unsaturated fats that they might be getting from their diet, making the fats healthy and intelligently consumable for us human beings. Now, vitamin E, even in humans, will cause some of the PUFA to be detoxified. One of the small effects of vitamin E is to destroy the presence of polyunsaturated fatty acids and protect the presence of its after effects, which we know are very, very degenerative and bad. So if someone ate fast food, for example, like French fries or something like that, you could literally take vitamin E to lessen the blow of the vegetable oil the fries were cooked in. Another way to do it in an intelligent way is to cook the French fries yourself, but to cook them in coconut oil to be even more health conscious, as well as lovely and happy and friendly to your wonderful metabolism and thyroid. Now, a word on gallbladder disease. We definitely have to talk about gallbladder disease because this is something that is also surfacing when it comes to talks about saturated fat versus unsaturated fat. So here we go. There is a great tendency of hypothyroid people to have gallbladder disease and trouble digesting fats. The best thing to do for gallbladder disease is to improve your thyroid function and to avoid all unsaturated fats in all forms. Now, the myth tells us that the only difference between the saturated and unsaturated fatty acids is their shape. And they claim that has to do with the mobility of the fat in the membrane and so on, says Dr. Peat. But really, the absolute difference between the two is the way they bind to protein. Since the basic framework of the cell is protein, saturated fats bind properly to the proteins. And the unsaturated fats, which we know are the enemy, do not bind the same and bind to other proteins that they literally should not be binding to. The protein that transports the thyroid hormone has sites that associate with the double bonds in the thyroid hormone molecule, and the unsaturated fat binds to the same sites on the transport protein so that the protein can't carry thyroid. It carries unsaturated fats instead. So, what can be done about gallbladder disease? Well, liver herbs can also improve the function of bile flow and digestion of fats, such as tinctures of gentian, which is G as in George, E, N as in Nancy, T as in Tom, I as in igloo, A as in apple, N as in Nancy, gentian.
Now, gentian is an herb and the root of a plant, and less commonly the bark, and they are used to make medicine for digestion problems such as loss of appetite, fullness, intestinal gas, diarrhea, gastritis, heartburn, and vomiting, and it's also used for fever, hysteria, diabetes, and high blood pressure. This will assist the individual until the individual can get their system functioning on its own with a proper balanced diet, void of, you guessed it, unsaturated fat. Now, pyruvic dehydrogenase feeds glucose into the system, but the mitochondrial oxidative system itself basically destroys the proportion to the polyunsaturated fat exposure. The mitochondria produces something like 35 times the energy per molecule of sugar than the diabetic pathway can produce. The fat cells have been found to burn at rest, as they are always at rest, where the heart or skeletal muscles only in a relatively quiet state will burn saturated fat. But the fat cells, being always at rest, slowly energize themselves by burning the saturated fat. That's why with age, our cells and tissue become more and more saturated with polyunsaturated fats because the fat cells themselves are using the good stuff. Literally, again, how we know saturated fat is so good because the fat cells themselves, even as we age, begin to use their own stuff. But it takes away the good stuff and then it starts using the bad stuff. So since birth, there is a progressive increase in polyunsaturated fats in all tissues from our diet. So when we are under a lot of stress and don't get enough sugar, we unfortunately have to burn the bad stuff, aka the PUFAs, doing many things to the mitochondria, including even sudden death some people have experienced. The chronic effect of these PUFAs is known to destroy the genetic material in the actual mitochondrion, where saturated fat does not do that, which, unfortunately, if destroyed, gives a higher propensity to cancer due to the destroyed DNA. Now, this snowball of destructive changes with age only occurs in the presence of polyunsaturated fatty acids. In a diet void of the polyunsaturated fatty acids and higher in saturated fat, the saturated fats are thankfully quietly oxidized. They're just good little Samaritan people. So, most likely, if you're a diabetic, you are going to be breaking down these bad fats in your tissues, and you can get a blood test showing that you have higher fatty acids in your blood, creating the inefficient metabolism. Dr. Peat goes on to share. If a diabetic who is not overweight and is athletic only ate literal saturated fat, they can change over to the healthy metabolism very quickly. So if you're just healthy, you're athletic, and you don't have a lot of actual body fat to lose, you can change over to the proper metabolism very quickly by having a balanced diet of high protein, saturated fat, a little bit of vegetables, the ones that, of course, we will cover in other attachments, as well as having the proper sugars coming into your body, which you'll find out is higher in glucose and fructose. And then beyond that, it is just the focus on keeping those unsaturated fats really, really low and out
of your diet. If you do eat them, those polyunsaturated fats should really be in your diet once to twice per week, absolute maximum, and just as a treat, not as a part of a daily balanced diet routine, if you want to keep your thyroid healthy and your metabolism healthy as well. And if they manage all forms of stress well, including mental stress, one can very quickly shift over to the efficient metabolism. The key is to eat a balanced diet with a healthy amount of sugar and no polyunsaturated fatty acids. Our liver treats PUFAs the same way it treats other toxins, if it has the available energy to do so. Because remember, if you think about the liver is kind of like the bouncer of the party. So it decides what comes in, literally who is cool for the party and who is not cool for the party. And the way the liver treats polyunsaturated fatty acids is no different from any toxin or any foreign invader that comes near the body. What it does is it attaches the PUFAs to a sugar and prepares them to be excreted in the urine, just like any other toxin that the body needs to get rid of. So anything that comes into the body that is unnatural, that the body does not like, what happens is the liver attaches the polyunsaturated fats to a sugar and prepares them to be excreted in your urine, just like any other toxin that the body needs to get rid of. Now, if your liver stays energized with frequent feedings and good nutrition, it can slowly eliminate polyunsaturated fatty acids without running them through the mitochondria. Of course, that's easier for the body, but when you're under stress, such as, for example, like an extreme diet that is super, super low in calories, doesn't have any balance, and you lose weight really, really fast, as well as like all kinds of weight, bad weight, good weight, water, everything. You not only damage all of your blood vessels along in this process, says Dr. Peat, but your nerve cells and so on. But you very specifically knock out the exact enzymes which are needed to detoxify things in your body. So going back to balance and doing things properly, it is best for a human being to lose their body fat slow as the metabolism adjusts, so you don't knock out any of the good stuff that detoxifies all of the enemies coming into your body. This is always about health first, fat loss second, because with the health comes the fat loss, and that's just the way it is. And Dr. Peat has proven it in his 40 years of research. Now, what about cravings? Because craving seems to be a big problem why people simply cannot lose the body fat. Well, we have very specific nerves that will increase our wanting for foods that have vitamins, nutrients, enzymes we are deficient in. In other words, a protein deficient person or animal will gravitate towards protein-containing foods. But the most intense connection between need and appetite is between sugar and salt, both of which are good for the body, and this is complete misinformation to think otherwise. So the media is portraying that the polyunsaturated fat is good, soy is good, sugar is bad, salt is bad, and saturated fat is evil. When both sugar and salt are very important to regulate your stress compounds in your systems, as well as many other things, including lowering your adrenaline, and saturated fat is huge for virtually everything metabolism, and soy creates more estrogen, which is absolutely toxic to the human body. Now, you can't just eat sugar on its own or salt on its own. You need to balance them out with protein, good fat, and preferably fiber, just the way that I, Coach Jay Hyler, your body transformation specialist, recommends you to do so. Now, just to review, when you raise the free fatty acids in your body, what happens? You inhibit the utilization of glucose. This is bad because the stress this inability to utilize glucose causes then increases the free fatty acids all over again in your blood, which then repeats this vicious cycle all over again. Basically, my friend, the system is designed not to eat PUFA, the human body, meaning the system. And it's the PUFA that very systematically turns on the very stress hormones that interfere with the energy-making process of the body, causing this terrible cascade of problems. Why does the body do this? The body is designed to respond to saturated fat and to block the stress reaction. So, not to beat a dead horse over the head with a massive mallet, but it is the polyunsaturated fat that is evil, and saturated fat plus some monounsaturated fat that is awesome in accordance with healthy proteins, sugars, which of course is carbs, and fiber. I hope this has completely and totally and utterly proven why polyunsaturated fat should not be in your diet, why saturated fat and monounsaturated fat are the healthy ones. This is Coach Jay, your body transformation specialist. Let me know if you have any questions. Good day.